For this video, we're going to focus on colors and messing around with our geometries and our backgrounds, basically. From where we left off, we should have this spinning green cube with a directional light somewhere the back right side. For the sake of clarity, for now, we're just going to actually get rid of this and switch the material to mesh basic material, just so you can kind of see where everything is very clearly. It's not aesthetic, but for now it doesn't need to be. We're gonna get rid of that light. Okay, cool. So let's just say we want to map maybe the color of the cube to where our mouse position is. How would we do that? So first, we need to create an event listener to figure out where the mouse is. Basically, when the mouse moves, this event listener is going to trigger. It's going to call a function. And then every single time that function calls, it's going to basically update the color of the cube based on the position of the mouse. Seems easy enough logically, right? So how do we do that? Window.event listener, mouse move. And it's going to call a function called onMouseMove, and default is to false. Oh, and if you notice in line 27, I didn't go over this in the very first video, but it's included in the boilerplate. It's just another event listener for onWindow resize. It's just going to make everything nice and resizable. I guess you can't see anything right now, but it's going to make everything just nice and resizable. And basically, I just included in pretty much everything. Okay, so now we need to make our actual function called onMouseMove. So actually when it calls, it has the function to call. Cool. Now what do we want to do? First, we need to actually pass the event in. So when this event listener triggers, basically whenever the mouse moves, it's going to have an event. And it's going to trigger this event listener, which will then trigger this function right here on mouse move. So we need to pass that event in. And then, before I forget, let mouse equals new 3.vector2. Basically, that's just you can think of it as this as kind of a container for two variables, basically, essentially, which is going to be your x and our y. So, which is why we're going to go to say mouse.x. Since it's a vector 2, we can say mouse.x equals event.x divided by window.innerWidth. And we want to do this because we want to map it to 0, like from -1 to 1, basically, which is going to make our lives easier later on. Mouse.y equals event.y by window.innerHeight times 2 plus 1. Let me make this negative. Honestly, I don't exactly know the exact math of why this all works, why you have to multiply 2 minus 1 plus 1, but this is what they use in the raycasters, and it works. And just to kind of show you what actually is going on, or what happens, so you have a better understanding. Just going to console log it first. Okay. So now you can see in this upper corner is basically -1, 1. This corner is going to be 1, 1, 1, -1, -1, -1. So now everything is mapped to 1s and 0s, basically. It's going to make our lives a lot easier. So now how would we normally go about changing the color of our cube or like our ellipse or whatever in like P5 or a 2D canvas? Oftentimes we would actually do things by, we would create a variable, right? Call it color, or well, not color because it's taken, but like call, and then we would update it basically, right? In our draw loop, we would, mouse X, mouse Y, map it to something, some kind of RGB, and then update that variable. And then, in our draw loop, we would update, right? So we can't really do that the same way in Three.js, mainly because in lines 17 through 20 here, it won't update retroactively. You call init once, right? And then it takes the current instance of geometry, the current of material, and it creates this instance of a cube. And from then on, it's added to the scene in this current state. Even if you make this a variable and then you change this later on using mouse move or whatever functions later on in your code, it won't go back and then change what happens to this cube. If you make a new cube with the updated materials, then it would. It'll have the new color, but it won't change the original cube. So how would we do that? We actually are going to access the cube, access the material in the cube, and then access the color, and then update the parameter from there. And then you tell it basically to re-render. And you just say, hey, we made a change to the material for this geometry. Please re-render. It's actually very simple. But that's basically what's going on. It's very simple to do though. So we say cube, and we can access it just like that because it's a global variable, or it's global cube.material.color.setRGB. And for setRGB, I believe it takes it's mapped from 0 to 1, not 255. So it makes our lives easier. We'll just start with 1 for now because we have only mouse X and Y, right? So then we just say mouse X, mouse Y. And just like that. Okay, cool. It's working. So basically, based on our mouse position on the screen, it's going to change the color of the cube. Cool. Now, let's say we want to mess around with the background. How do we do that? So obviously we don't have a background command, but we have something very similar. We have clear color, which we set in the renderer. So we say render.set clear color. And then inside here, you could do a lot of different things. I think you could do hexadecimal, you could do RGB, you could even say the color blue or whatever, and use strings. I think for this, I'm going to say RGB 255, 30, 30, just for now. I think that works. Okay, yeah, so it's a very bright yellow color, and we're going to use this as a default for now. We're going to change that. So let's just say instead of mapping it to our mouse X and mouse Y position, let's just change it on click. So we have two forms of interactivity. How about that? So how do we do that? Similar to how we did mouse move, we're going to add another window, event listener. And this time, instead of mouse move, it's going to be click. So every single time there's a click, it's going to track that, and it's going to call on mouse click, and set default to false. Then we make that function. Okay, now what do we want to do? So we could very well say something like array colors equals, I don't know, red, blue, navy. Like you could do something like this, right? And then you could say like, I don't know, let RNG equals math dot random times 2, right? I think technically you'd have to say like math dot floor dot random. But yeah, so that's one way to do it. If you want to have, for example, you want to choose your colors, and like, hey, every single time I click, it changes the shade of blue, or it changes the shade of whatever, and you could have this array of all these different colors that you want to keep it limited to, and then access it by the index, right? And you could say like you could change this to another variable, not this, so the clear color to some kind of variable, and change based off that. But let's just say if we want to make it completely random, how would we do that? Well, the easiest way is probably to use RGB instead of strings. And if we want to make complete random, we're not going to have an array. So, okay. So let's just, same thing, let's just map the green value and the blue value for now. Of course, you could find some other ways to map all three, but for now we're just going to say the green value and blue value, just to make it easy. Gval 0, that bval equals 0 for now. Okay. And then what we need to do is say render.setClearColor. Again, if you just change the variable, actually I haven't tested this, I'm pretty sure it doesn't work. I'm pretty sure, yeah, the render is not going to adjust this because the variable changed, since you've set it up here already. So you basically have to just call it again. Luckily, we can do this very easily, again, with that same command, render.clearColor. And then we just say RGB, we can say 255 for now, and then gval, bval. Of course, this is not how you can actually input the variables, right? So we need to use, I believe it's called template literals. So we're going to use our backwards apostrophe quotation. I'm actually not sure what this is exactly called, but then you do something like that. Put our brackets there, and inside a string. Is this string literal or temple literal? I don't remember the exact term. But basically when we do this, right, we have our backwards quotations or backwards apostrophes, and we have our $ and these brackets. Basically, it's going to be variables. It now knows to take these as variables instead of string normally. Yeah, so right now we set it at 0, 0. So I believe when we click, why is it not going to red? Oh, because there's no R. Wait. Oh, because there's also no close parentheses. There we go. Okay, so now when we click, it goes to red. Okay, I was like, what am I doing wrong? It was 2 different typos. Great. So now we want to actually change these to random variables, right? So similar to kind of what we did here, right? So we wanted to add up 255. So math.floor first to make sure it's basically turns into an integer. It doesn't actually turn into an integer, but for the sake of this, it essentially does. It goes to like the highest integer, I think the highest full integer, something like that. You can look up what math.floor does, but it's going to be helpful here so we don't get these like crazy floats, which math random can return. Random times 255. And I've already realized I forgot these. Okay, so now every single time we click, it's going to give a random color. All right, so now we've mapped the color of the cube to your XY position and randomly changing the color when we click. Again, not the most advanced thing, not the most aesthetically pleasing thing yet, barely scratching the surface of creative coding. But now, hopefully you guys have a better understanding of how you can kind of mess with colors. I hoped I didn't ramble too much in this video. Maybe I'll cut some of it down in post, I don't know. And hopefully this is helpful. But yeah, this is working with colors through JS.